have faith. He lives in you. He lives in me. He watches over everything we see. Into the waters, into the truth.
Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Cyrus Gray, and this is the 10th edition of our program, Election Central. In a short while, I will be introducing our guests, but I'd like to do a quick intro on what we're going to be talking about today. So, today, our topic is basically on corruption and incompetence. We're speaking from the backdrop on what make nations fail or what make nations succeed. And as always, the central purpose of our program is to discuss our country, discuss its shortcomings, and discuss its prospects and advanced ideas. So we're going to be having, we have a list of panelists, five today. They will be coming in at different intervals. Um, and as they come in, they will join into the discussions. We already have a number of our panelists in studio already. So in a short while, I'm going to have each of them say a little bit about themselves. But again, welcome to Election Central. We'll get on the way in a short second.
night and the spirit of life calling Mamela and a voice with the fear of a child answered I am Mamela. Wait, there's no mountain too great. Hear these words and have faith. Oh, have faith. He lives in you. He lives in me. He watches over everything we see. Into the waters, into the truth. In your reflection, He lives in you. Free. And a voice in the wind whispers, I am Mamela. Wait, there's no mountain too great. Hear these words and have faith. He lives in you. He lives in me. He watches over everything we see. Into the water, into the truth.
Again, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I know it's after 7 o'clock in Monrovia. So we'd like to welcome you to Election Central. First, guys, let's do a quick test of our audio here. I have two of my guest panelists already in studio, Mr. Lee Davis and Mr. Alfonso Noonan. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Lee, I can hear you loud and clear, and I see you also, Alfonso. Can you hear me? Alfonso, can you hear me? I see. Okay, so we'll go back and see what the issue Alfonso's audio. I can't hear him though, right? Lee, you can hear Alfonso. You can hear some noise from down there, right?
I believe I heard something. I don't know if it was coming from him or you.
Alfonso, he's probably muted. So we'll get around to it. I'll send him some message. But Lee, welcome to Election Central. I know this is your first time on our show. Today is the 10th edition of our show. So, like I've told you in the discussions we had behind the scenes, is that we try to put up uh, impactful discussions on this show and talk about how they relate to Liberia in the hope that we can flag some recommendations that both in the public and private sector can form some changes in Liberia. I did send out a write out that is relevant to the discussion on corruption and incompetence and all that. Where it's just used as a baseline. But what we're basically discussing is what are the things that an organization, in this case a nation, must do if it must prosper. And then we'll look at what's happening in our country. How have we done some of these things, if we are doing it anyway. And then we will make comparison with countries that are almost similar to us. In some cases, got limited advantages than we have, and what they've done. So we're gonna earmark talking about a little bit about Rwanda. We'll bring some indicators from Rwanda and Singapore. It will surprise you to know that in the 60s and 70s, Singapore was one of the poorest countries in the world. They have no natural resource. They are an island. They have less than 350 square miles of land. Yet today they are the first world country. And we're told that somewhere in the early parts of the 70s, they sent a team of economists to Liberia to benchmark Liberia, to talk to Liberia and say, look, how is it you guys, our economy are growing so fast? What can you teach us? That Singapore is what it is today. It's a lot to talk about where we've come from, how far we've moved. So we're going to be getting into this discussion. So let me try Alfonso again. Alfonso, can you hear me? I still can't hear Alfonso, so I'll go in the back and try to shoot him a call. But in the meantime, welcome Lee. Could you just use this opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself? Why I do some house cleaning with Alfonso?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Lee, I can hear you loud and
Okay,
clear.
very well. Very well. Then I'll continue. Yeah, my name is Lee Davies, and I've worked in both the oil and gas as well as petrochemical industry in the U.S. here. And I'm a born natural Liberian, and I'm glad to be a part of the panel this afternoon.
Alfonso,
Yeah, yeah.
can you hear me now?
I hear you now. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to Election Central, and I'm really glad that you could consent to join us in these discussions. We have one of our panelists also here, to Lee Davis, so you guys will get to know and interchange with each other. But while we have you, Alfonso, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you, Cyrus. And hi, Mr. Davis. Good to see you.
Likewise,
Um,
Mr. Alfonso.
Absolutely. Yep. So, I mean, I've worked in several sectors, as you may know, Cyrus. I worked with the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission. I was actually one of the first people um, who worked in establishing the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission, and I held my position. The first ever to hold that position was her information advocacy officer at the Justice and Peace Commission. And part of my work included investigating and reporting on human rights abuses during the first round of the Liberian civil conflict. Um, I also worked in election work, so I was the coordinator for the first ever homegrown Liberian election monitoring network that was established. And we monitored the 1997 elections. In my role, I was a coordinator for voter education and advocacy. So basically, trained and placed people around the country to monitor the elections, but also to do voter education. Um, I was credited by the Election Commission for coming up with the idea of if you saw, if you were in Liberia in 1997, if you read election reports of that big poster that was used during the election process with the photos of all of those people, all of the candidates that was used by the election commission and other organizations in the country to educate people around the country. Because we know, our people can't read, but if you use pictures and images of candidates, that was a great medium by which to get them to participate. So as a coordinator of voter education for Leon, which is the Liberia Elections Observers Network, I came up with and created that idea that was then taken over by the Elections Commission, by IFS, and other groups that Carter Center that participated in the election process in Liberia. I've worked also in international human rights affairs with a number of human rights organizations here in the U.S. Currently, I work in workers' rights issues.
Okay, Alfonso, thanks a lot, man. Welcome. I will look forward to a vibrant exchange as we with the rest of the panelists. But what I'd like us to begin with, because we're going to be doing some analysis here,
Mhm.
um, relevant for how organizations succeed and fail. As, even though we'll be speaking generally, but we want to make it also specific to some extent to Liberia. We're in an election period right now. Francois, you bring a lot of value to what's happening in Liberia right now. Have you been following the registration process?
Yeah, to an appreciable extent, yes. I can't say I know everything about the process, but I
Yeah.
have been following. Yeah.
They have been, and Lee, to the extent that you can chime in on this, I will be fine, but it will lead to the greater topic. There have been concerns. You all may know that I think about close to 2 months ago, the delayed population census was finally unveiled to the Liberian people, and there were speculations that the numbers may have been blown. There were concerns that earlier claims of impropriety may throw shadow on whether the numbers are even right or wrong. And then there was also a claim the Elections Commission started registration, and then one of the parties or the alliance, the CPP, took them to court, asking that the process be halted because, according to their claim, the Constitution required that those new numbers be incorporated in the planning that has to do with new voters registration and all that. Last week, I think that the Supreme Court threw that case out. But just to pick up the two of you guys, the census and the elections. How does the census impact the voting results? Especially, let's start with you, Alfonso, who dealt with elections. How does it to be able to at least lay bare this concern? How does the census affect voting through voters registration and actual voting?
Very, very significantly. First of all, why do people vote? What are elections? What's democracy? I mean, so that's the foundation right there. Um, the census tells us first and foremost who the citizens are in the country, where they live, and basically who's going to vote. So the census gives us that data of the people who should be voting, who have attained voting age, who are citizens to vote and eligible to vote, etc. So the census creates that foundation. Without census, without knowing how many people even live in the country and are of voting age, how do you even determine the outcome of the election process? Let's say I don't exactly remember, but I believe it was in the early 1900s. CDB King, I believe, when the number of voters was
19,
more than the
not, not,
people.
1930 elections.
Okay, the number of voters actually uh,
15 times more than the
15 times
total
more
registered voters.
total registered voters.
Oh,
So the census, in a way, gives us the data to look at to say how many people will be voting in this election. And it's important to know that because again, that will impact the outcome of the election. If we don't know how many people live in the country, the outcome of the election comes into question because there's that doubt that it could be manipulated. And that's where the sense, and that's why the census is really, really important. And then the other thing is that where do the people live? And that's why the Constitution and election law calls for demarcation of constituencies, so that we know. Okay, you said 5 million people voted. Where do they live? Where do they come from? How do we even arrive at 5 million people voting? And that's why it was very critical and very important for the census to have been done early, and the census results, challenged, and go through the process of the legislature verifying them and establishing constituencies before we even go to voter registration. Um, as you said, Cyrus, there were questions that some parts of the country, based upon the census data that was released, even though they say it's not final, but based upon the census data that was released, that some parts of the country gained 50%, 100%, even more in population growth. So we needed to see the data that contributed to that. All of that is still in question, and again, it's a question that will impact the outcome of the election process. So census play a very critical role in it.
Alfonso, I've got a question. Doesn't
Yep,
that also tie into legislative assignments?
absolutely. So it ties into a lot of things. It ties into legislative assignments. It ties into the distribution of resources. Our law, our election law, our constitution says where there are 20,000, I believe it's 20,000 people or more, there should be a constituency established there. So it's representation, so those people gain represent. If you say the population grew in that place, then you redemarcate so that people have representation. So they have a voice in the national legislature that can advocate for resources for them. It also gives them, so yes, the number, it's not just representation, it's also the distribution of resources, national resources to those places in terms of development, in terms of jobs, in terms of social services. All of those are impacted by the census.
Wow, Francois, I haven't heard somebody explain it like this, especially the component that requires representation, which is a fact. If there are additional number of people, and Article 80 is saying that there's a threshold, a number of people on the basis of which you have to set up a new constituency. That means
Yep.
if the census is not impacted in the allocation, that means that there are a bunch of people who probably are not properly represented, right? But this brings me to one of the two words that we're working up with: competence.
Yep.
And I'm going to throw this question out to you: How can we do census in the absence of the physical demographic of addresses in the country, right?
Yep.
Where you cannot match a person to a physical address, even
Yep.
today, 20 years after the war. What, is there not missing pieces there?
Oh, there are several, there are gaps, there are gulfs, not even gaps, not even missing pieces. There's a whole huge gulf that's missing right there. And that's even contributing to one of the controversies that we have today, which is
Food trucking,
voter trucking,
correct?
right? So people are free outside of having these, outside of having, let's say, um, geopolitical demarcations, as you said, like addresses, but also just national identities that would, national identities that would determine where people live. People are now, candidates and political parties are taking advantage and actually talking people around the country to go and vote for them to influence the outcome of the election process. And as you said, 20 years after Civil War, we still have failed to even hold a census. And that's really, really critical. This census should have taken place, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or even last year? The Bureau of Statistics is telling us that The final census results will not come out until June. Well, we're holding elections in October.
In October, right?
So the census result won't come out until June. So that is another problem. What happens if we say, oh, the population has actually grown in certain places? How do we even verify that? How do we even verify that? That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is what we talked about earlier, which is representation and distribution of resources, etc. If a population has grown in a place for up to 20,000, part of resource distribution is that maybe now they need a high school if they had only an elementary school before. Maybe
Yeah.
now they need a larger clinic or a hospital. So census impacts the allocation of national resources as well. And that's the point I made earlier. So, again, as you said, it's a failure. It's a failure of incompetence, but it's also a failure of will to do these things, to allocate resources to do the census, for example. We've known for years that every 10 years you do census. So why didn't you put resources together and do the proper planning to do the census within the 10 years that were required? Why are you doing census 8 months, 9 months to elections when in fact that makes it almost impossible to do allocation of constituencies to put people in the right places for them to vote? Our constitution and election law require that people register and vote in the constituencies where they live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Lee.
No, I was just agreeing with what
Okay.
Alfonso said. Interestingly enough, I reflect on my early time in Liberia in the mid '70s. I had the opportunity to work for the census they had at that time under the auspices of the Department of Planning. And my home and many homes in the Crown Hill, Slipway, McDonald Street, and all the different parts of Liberia were canvassed and assigned addresses. So I don't know. I mean, we built that, and yeah, I understand we've gone through a war, and but we should have records and things of that sort to build off. Wouldn't you say that, Alfonso?
100%. I don't know. Maybe somebody would argue that there have been a turnover of civil servants or new people have come and blah blah blah. But in any for you to be able to make any advancements, you have to have a basis. So and one of the bases is where did you start, so that you see uh, how has things advanced. How do you want and what I asked that question about pivoting from census to addresses. The question of addresses, I want us to speak to it specifically to development.
Yep.
Okay? I mean, you have a population, we are assuming, now 5.2 million people based on the recent census. We don't know how it is spread. Maybe they have the data. But at some point in time, how did they match these people with a particular locale? Okay, if a simple thing like even making delivery of a package in Monrovia is a challenge. So if you were able to calculate the time, the lead time and waste that's involved in trying to figure out what is the house behind where they're swallowing the GB and how hard is it for you to be able to map up a country or a city even after war, because as a basis that supports every other activity, whether public or private sector. We're gonna go into that, but we have our third guest on, Ava Tupa. Ava, welcome. So I'll give you a minute to just or say something about yourself, and then you can chime into the program. We already have with us Lee Davis and Alfonso Nonat. Can you hear me, Ava?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Welcome.
Wonderful. Alfonso, how you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. And my
Good
big
to see
brother
you.
Lee, How you doing,
Yeah.
bro? Long time.
High fives. Good to see you.
We play Freedom Boy at the gas station from way back when they started. Yeah.
Hey! Stop letting the people know our ages.
I hear you. So, but even know what at the gas station is, so no. But
Oh,
Alfonso, to a large extent, what Alfonso is saying, about the sensors, the purpose of the sensors, the incompetence around how the sensors were implemented, plus the corruption. I mean, it all ties in. You see that's an example of institutional corruption right there, where all the signals and signs were there from the get-go that this process was a failed process. The monies were not being used properly. It was corrupt. The people who should have done the very first training, they were not paid properly. The people who should have done the actual census, they were not paid, and all the hiccups and everything. And there were actual video after the initial census with people showing people how to manipulate the data in order to get to the numbers. So in totality, that census is like completely bogus. That's why they can't even bring like the detailed numbers, right? So we have the 2008 census. We have all the different age bands from zero to probably like something like 93, and then they got 94 or plus, into one category because they're not that many. Now, if we were to compare that data, by age band with what this census comes up with, we'll see a complete disconnect because, like he said, those growth percentages in those river oh, yeah, the growth percentages in some of those southeast counties and Monserrato don't tie in with just few years ago. I think probably 2 or 3 when they did like a demographic survey and show what the fertility rate was in different counties. So when you see that disconnect, you know that they're trying to manipulate the data, and the fact that they come close to, because like I did my own projection of the population coming into 2023, it is about 5.2 million. So they rep on spot with the total figures. But how they break down the figures is where the issue is. And that is the biggest problem. And once they can give that detailed data, that's why you see Lists is not trying to give us the detailed data. If they give the detailed data, it will be easy to see that somebody who in 2008 was, let's say, 17 years old. So that band there should be similar to somebody who's like 31 years today, the people in their age group. And it's not, it will not resonate. So that's why they hesitate in the, and then they you know, um, setting a threshold by the legislature based on the census has not happened. And because they have not set the threshold, so they cannot demarcate the constituencies, and the NEC cannot assign people. So everybody who has a voting record, voting ID card right
All
now,
right.
they do not have
Yeah.
a specific constituency. So all of those things are problems with the entire elections, and is not being recognized. So I don't even want to get into the whole talk about unique identification, who will help us do much more in the whole process of identification. Why is NEC doing biometrics? NEC is in the business of registration, not identification. Identification is Liberia Identification Registry Bureau, and they should be doing that. So all of those issues, it just show, or I mean, lose, governance, proper governance, and people recognizing what the real core mandate and responsibilities are and executing those versus just looking at what the monetary allowance is that will come to their unit or their department or their ministry or their agency or their commission because of that, and with the power that they have or influence, try to get that money instead of letting the people who's supposed to do the job do the job.
okay, Ava, good point. So we've talked about the inadequacies around census, and then I brought in the issue of the actual mapping of the country. I don't get a sense that we actually have discussed that mapping. Who's responsible for actually mapping the country? Mapping means basically you go to 19th Street. I know you got 19th Street and Chisholm Avenue, right? So those streets were all laid out already, but you can identify a number for a particular location and end of those streets to say, okay, this is 219th Street, 300. It doesn't appear to me that it's something that's very hard to do. Who's responsible
Okay.
for that?
So first of
In my
all,
mind, Okay,
Sorry.
let Alfonso. No, go ahead,
Now, I
Alfonso.
was
I'll
going to
come
say
after you.
before we even get to the point of who's responsible, and I will leave that with Ava to talk about who's responsible for doing that. But I just wanted to speak to the importance and the fact that we already have a structure to do that. As Brother Lee said earlier,
Correct.
in the
Way back into the
seven
70s.
in
Yeah.
the
That's correct.
70s, there was
That's
a
correct.
system.
Well,
So
Fanso, I went to Greenville, as part of my work in 2001, 2002,
yeah,
and I see that there's an old dilapidated building there, but it has only inscribed the post office.
exactly,
So
exactly.
if you had a post office over there, that means they were delivering mails to physical locations.
Locations, exactly. So that structure exists. Now, you mentioned earlier maybe civil servants have left, but that's immaterial
Yes,
because
I agree.
everywhere around the world, civil servants turn over. So that's not even an argument for anybody to make. So the structure is there from the 1970s. Then let's come to even during the Civil War. Self and other people were able, as the guns were firing, to create a system whereby they were able to
They could distribute food, yeah,
number
to
of
houses.
buildings, count number of people in houses, and distribute food. So it is not that difficult to do. That is a structure that still exists. The self data, the self information should be somewhere in the database. If the Liberians don't even have it, self was working with the WHO. It is somewhere there. It's in the database. It's in the system. So again, I will say it and I will emphasize here, it's a function of incompetence and is a function of the willpower or the lack thereof to do some of these things. If self, while we were fighting the civil war, if the other organization behind the lines, I forget the name right now, were also able to, count people and distribute food and mark houses, there's no way that 20 years after the war we shouldn't be able to do it. And real quickly, I visited the U.S. Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. And I encourage everybody who has the opportunity to do so. When you go through the museum, you have the opportunity of walking through the museum from when the U.S. Postal Service system started to where they currently are with airplanes and cars delivering stuff and all of that. They didn't just start up there. They started by having people walk from one town to the next to deliver mail because when they came, some people, when they came and started settling in places, some of their relatives would say, "Oh, I'll stay here." The other group of people would say, "I'll move to the other village and town." How did they communicate? They established a system. And that system, as you walk through the museum, you see it, where a group of young people will be charged with taking the mail from one town to the next, and then the other young people in the other town would take it to the next town, etc., and they would, it will be repeated, coming backwards. Then they went to using mules. Then they went to actually using commercial transportation services. So, for example, there's an Afonso who has a vehicle that's traveling from Monrovia to Ganta. They'll say, "Please take our mail, and we'll pay you for it."
That's what
So
the people do. That's what the people do in Nigeria.
that's
There
what they
probably
do.
one guy going between one of the villages.
Yeah, yeah,
Apart from passengers, they give
yeah.
packages. Say, "Oh, give it to this person, care this
Give it
person
to this.
medicine, and pay for it." Yeah.
Absolutely. And then that process continue until to where they are today when where the postal service has airplanes that's delivering stuff. I'm saying this to say that before I conclude, the story is told. I don't know how accurate it is that a postal affairs minister from Liberia came and had a meeting with the postmaster general here in the U.S. and was asking for assistance and said we need assistance, mapping up the country and to establish a postal system and all of that. And the story is told that a guy told him we actually already did that. We have materials available to show that we did do that for your country and for many other countries in West Africa. Have you? And then the story is told that the Postmaster General of the U.S. asked the Liberian Minister of Postal Affairs, have you seen or heard of this book, this document? And he said, no. He said, well, that's where the assistance is. We've already done that for your country. Go and look for it and read it. How in the name of hell, if you were competent, you wouldn't even do your own research before going to somebody to ask them for something? Again, that speaks to incompetence and a lack of will.
And the evidence of the Postmaster General's supposed statement is there, because
Yeah,
if you can go online and find a Liberian stamp going into the 1930s and 1940s, I don't believe they were selling stamps unless those stamps were being used to place on letters or packages that were being delivered to particular locations.
addresses and locations. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but yeah, I mean, but a lot of time people picked up their mail at the post office though. Back in the day, I can remember.
Which is
going to the
also
post
which is
office.
also here. The post office will keep. You can pay for boxes at the post office, and you can pick
Right.
up your mail there. But I
But there was-
grew up in Nima. They delivered mails to the houses in Yekepa, where we were.
Right. That they had an address system. I lived in Yekepa too. We had an address system. It was H, it was C, it was F, it was G. You know, all those
C4,
areas.
C3, all the houses had specific numbers. Yeah.
Right.
Do we have an address system now?
No, we
I
did
think-
not. And
No.
you know, like you were talking
I
about.
think we have it. I think we have it. We have just not codified it.
Yeah.
Because all those streets were laid out, there were addresses there. We haven't just done the heavy lifting to go back and say, where does Warren Street begin? And start to number the even and odd and create that template so that it becomes what. Guess what will surprise you? If you're in Monrovia, say you are leaving from Marshall and you take your iPhone or any smartphone and enter the name of, say, the Ministry of Finance, right, into that phone. Google will drill you all the way to the Ministry of Finance. You
But
will follow
yeah,
it.
the GPS covers Liberia. It covers Monrovia.
I'm also in River G in 2021. That River G, we are going to Maryland, and then we're going to Grand Cru. I haven't been there before. I had a colleague of mine, an American lady who was the director of health, in the car, and we're heading to Grand Cru to go and inspect on hospitals. And she took her tablet and she put the address there. I'm sitting there, we're going, and she following instruct me. Okay, the next town is called. She will call the town name. So I'm wondering. I said, what the white woman doing? You know. But behold, she showed the stuff to me, and even in the high interior, those towns were mapped and coming out on Google.
Yep.
So how high is
Yeah,
it now
that's
for us to
satellite.
actually? Yeah, go ahead,
All
go ahead,
comes
Lee.
from satellite mapping.
Yes.
Go ahead. Uh-huh.
So that is an existing structure, Lee, that we can even capitalize on to,
Yes.
do the simple basic thing. I mean, if you can find a place on Google, find a house on Google, find a place, why don't you just follow Google and map places?
And map it. And put a number on it. Create a unique identity for it. And it's simple. All you do is just give it a number.
Yeah.
Because all those
I have-
streets in Liberia are named.
I have a statement, or you want to call it a question or a statement for IVA. You had deferred who is responsible to IVA.
Yep.
So now I'm on the branch
Oh,
of
okay.
statement
So,
or
so that's
no,
a great
I'm not
question.
through yet. I've got
Oh,
a statement or a
sorry,
question
go ahead.
for you. Okay.
Go ahead.
And the statement of question is, you, from what I know, representing one of the parties, okay, have invested interest in the outcome of the election. So why weren't you all proactive, or why haven't you all done something maybe a couple of years back, as Alfonso has said, why wasn't it done 2-3 years back? I mean, if I'm running for a public office, I would have a vested interest in ensuring that census and everything else that supports elections are in place. Now I defer to you.
It's
You got a hot
wonderful
seat.
to say that when you have a function. Huh?
I think you're in the hot seat. Go ahead.
No, there ain't no hot seat yet. I mean, it's not personal.
It's air conditioned. It's air conditioned.
you can say again, yes, we in America. Well, I got air conditioning in my house. Again, when you have a functional society, Lee, these things are normal. Since 2018, the census should have been done. We've been talking about this census. This government has failed in so many respects to carry out its fiduciary responsibilities to the people of Liberia. Even for, um, I believe the like usually after they set the threshold, they will always reset threshold for subsequent elections. They have not done that. They have failed. So as much as we've talked about it, nothing has happened. We just talked about the sequencing of census, legislator setting threshold, um, establishing the demarcation of different constituencies, identifying where people should vote. The ANC or CPP put forward a request or petition to the Supreme Court. It was denied because they felt NEC is doing its job, regardless of the fact that the legislature or the census legislators folks should have completed the census properly in a timely manner. And what they call them, the legislators should have set the threshold. Those were not done. The next day is executing its function, which is on a flawed basis. But basically, they're saying with all the nonsense that's going on, let it stay go ahead. And that's the Supreme Court. That's the highest level that you can take any case to. So yes, some political parties, especially the ANC, we have pushed on these topics, on these ideas. We talked about the whole census process. We have requested from lists to give us the detailed census so we can, look at that comparison on the population, the fertility rate that's supposedly in the southeast to make those comparisons. There has been no response in this government, and they saying May, and he said June. So maybe they have pushed it to June already because initially they said May. The bad governance we cannot control, and that's part of the institutional corruption in terms of how business is done, how government functions are executed.
Okay, guys. Thank you there, Adva. Guys, and ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the podium Councillor James Fordia. Councillor, welcome. We've started rolling these discussions already, looking at different indicators of non-performance or incompetence. I say non-performance because I think you guys are getting too hard, so I want to use a lesser word. So that's what we're gonna be going through, and then eventually we're gonna throw on the wall what kinds of recommendations and solutions that we think we should be pursuing right now. In getting to that, we will also reflect a few countries who have done things a little differently and are getting different results. So, welcome, Vodia. You'd like to say something?
Well, thank you, Cyrus. Thank you. It's good to hear. I'm not getting that feedback we had the last time we had this show.
Yeah.
I was a bit skeptical and worried about the reaction. But it sounds good, and it's good to be here and see two familiar faces I've not seen for a little while, especially Mr. Alfonso, who's my good friend and brother. I've also so I look forward to you. Actually, I've not met Mr. Lee Davis, so it's good to meet you, sir. And
Likewise.
whatever contribution I can make to this discussion, I'll be more than happy to make my contribution.
Thank you very much, brother.
Yeah.
So, before we move forward into the discussion, I wanted to bring up some indicators, and we'll start with Rwanda, right? Let me see if we can get that on the screen. You guys can see that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So Rwanda, independence in the 60s, they had a back and forth, but it came to a head in 1990. You know about this famous genocide. They lost millions of their people. They ended the war just around the time we were still going back and forth with ours. But in 2023, Rwanda is a whole different story. It's not that they have exercised a perfect democratic system, because their accurate system, the president has sustained himself in power. The constitution gave sometimes they call the country the presidential republic because of the powers that the president has. But look at their indicators. First, look at the country itself. I mean, I didn't know until recently that the country is only 16,000 square miles. It's landlocked.
Look,
It doesn't have
we
oceans.
are we are nearly 3 times the size of those people.
That's correct.
It,
43,000 square miles.
yeah, it's 16,000 square miles. It has a fairly, probably 3 times our population, 13 million. It has no proven natural resource. So 90% of the people in the country are involved one way or the other in farming, and most of the farming are subsistence or rudimentary. But you look at the credit rating; they got a B plus credit. They've invested heavily in infrastructure. They invested in education. I mean, the people are leaving Africa. I know of some people in Liberia who send their kids to Rwanda to go to university, and they're paying no more than $3,500 for the whole year, and the inside dormitories. But they had a similar situation like ours. What did they do differently? I mean, can anybody share with us what did they do
But
differently?
can you share our indicators, our similar indicators? Do you have them?
Oh, I thought I would take it straight from your head because they don't look good. First thing, we ain't got no damn credit rating.
Now, one of the things I wanted to bring to people's attention. That's why we consistently seeking these like crocodile concessions and loans and everything that not, benefiting the country. But anyway, since you don't want to, we know that we for the 3,000 square miles, we are 5.2 million people supposedly. If you want to say this, census is legit. We're about probably $620 in terms of GDP per capita. Agriculture again is probably like 35 to 37% of our economy. And we're not even effective in agriculture. I mean, everybody probably knows that. So those are our stats comparatively. But you hit on the first thing is leadership and vision. If you don't have those at the top, just forget it because that's where the culture starts from and that's where it can change from. Yes, Kagame is probably a benevolent dictator, if you want to say that's quote unquote a good thing. But at least the majority of his citizens have been pushed to do the right thing. Opportunities have been created. Culture, morals, values, ethics have been established in certain things. So, from not calling each other names, we still doing country Congo, just insulting each other all over the place. They don't, that divisiveness is not evident in Rwanda. They have a vision. When you look at the people on the progression of their technology vision, as we are creating our own vision, we're looking at other people's vision, other examples, Rwanda, Singapore, and other places. And you can see the difference in how the people look at long-term planning and how they try to ratify or legislate that kind of planning that is consistent and progressive, and people will account in their different positions or what are they doing, to be aligned with that larger vision in terms of fulfilling their part of the task responsible to ensure fulfillment of the vision. And we don't have that. We don't have accountability, unfortunately. And we talk about incompetence. We have a lot of people, unfortunately, who are just appointed to many of these critical positions who are not functional or who don't even have the ability to execute the mandate of those positions. So a lot of stuff is falling by the wayside and people are not really pressuring or pushing on it. But, change is necessary for us to be able to realize the potential that is Liberia.
Change from what to what? Somebody can answer that question, but I wanted to add a little bit on the invisible indexes that we have for Liberia here compared to Rwanda. For example, Rwanda has no proven natural resources. We have significant natural God-given resources. We have a coastline of 350 miles. We have a marine acreage of about 70,000 nautical miles of water that fill up with
Explain that to the people so they can
fill up. So let me put it in another context. In 1979, one of the 26 fishing companies we had in Liberia, one that was owned by a Liberian company, made a net profit of $49 million in 1979. The Maserado Fishing Company.
Yeah, Maserado.
That water that they got their fish from is still there. It's still there, but there's no industrial fishing going on in that water except that.
We don't say no. The Chinese people taking all our fish offshore.
No, here's the
Yeah.
deal. Yes, yeah, yeah. Here's part of the thing that we need to talk about. The European Union, the Europeans license had us to license about 40 fishing trawlers.
Right.
Those 40 fishing trawlers, mostly fishing tuna, are fishing in our water, but they do not call our port. What does that
No,
mean? They do not call our port. The argument is that we do not have the reception facility to process marine resources on our coast. So if you go to Ghana, for example, Tema, where I did some work researching, trying to help the NAFA, they have a whole port dedicated to ships coming in with their catch and processing it there. So they not export live fish. They export fillet, canned fish and all that. So they have canning companies there, canning mackerel and all that kind of stuff. Apart from the
But
fresh,
Cyrus,
yeah.
Cyrus, just give a brief idea. We're not at Ghana level, right? But just talk about how many jobs could be created with the cleaning, the labor around bringing the fish in, the
But
processing.
I've had precisely my
Yeah,
point. We are not at Ghana level, but we have a bigger marine acreage than Ghana.
Yes.
We have more raw material.
And the other question and the other issue here, Cyrus and Iva, is why is it that we are not at Ghana level? Maybe
Good question.
that's the question we should be asking.
That's where I'm going. That's where we're talking about the issue of more
Leadership,
towards
vision.
more towards the issue of competence. And
Exactly.
do we know what we have? We're talking about mapping or why the people found out what the other people were doing. It's a similar thing. If Maserado were pulling 49 million in net profit in 1979, do we have any kind of paper of what kind of organizations were running there, what exactly they were doing? There is. When I did some work for this research for this the fisheries in Liberia, I was introduced to ice factory. Let me repeat that: ice factory on the north side of the Freeport, the North Breakwater. The World Bank paid and they converted that X factory to a small fishing pier. They're still trying to figure out. But then when I got there, they said this was the Maserado Fishing Company ice factory. Can you contextualize that? You know what it means? If somebody have to have an ice factory, I mean they're processing a whole lot of stuff they got to preserve.
Yep.
So I just did a quick check, Cyrus. $49 million in 1979. Today, dollars will be $203 million.
Yeah. So the issue here, and before I even go further, I wanted to say hi to my brother, Mr. Verdier. He's right. We haven't met in a while, so I'm glad to see you here, JV. But it goes to the question of resources and value added. So some of the things you guys are talking about here, I would describe as resources and value added. We do have the resources, and you guys have already made the point, so I will not belabor that. But people cleaning fish at the Tema port and creating jobs, ships being able to dock at the Tema port, and all of those things are just talk about Firestone and our inability to process any of the resources there that we get. Talk about cocoa and coffee that our people grow, and we are unable to create jobs from those things. Besides the people who work on the farms and earn practically nothing, those are, those are very, very serious issues that have to do with vision, with leadership failure, and we can contrast that with what's happening in Rwanda. I listened to a presentation not long ago from the Rwandan President Paul Kagame, and what Mr. Kagame was talking about was exactly that: being able to use whatever little resources they have on the ground, and to capitalize on them. But fundamentally, he was talking about trades. He was talking about trades, not aid. He was speaking to Europeans, but he was also speaking to African leaders. What is it that Nigeria produces that Liberia can import? What is it that Liberia produces that Nigeria or Ghana can import? What are the services and technical know-hows that we can maybe get from the people at the Tama port, etc.
But
Again,
Alfonso,
mhm.
we have to produce first for us to
Well,
trade.
well, that is true. That
No,
is
but
true.
if we are visionary and we assess the continent and look at what's needed in different places, what our own natural resources are, and what kind of value addition we can bring, we can really be like a gateway to the ECOWAS region and to the rest of Africa,
Let me let me
especially.
let me let me blow your mind with something here, guys. While working in Liberia, I used to provide voluntary service to the Liberian Business Association. A guy, the president, Jim Strutter. I would go there and work with them, opening opportunities. And I got to learn from there that the United States, under the Agoya Treaty, has, and also Europe, they has a quota of certain commodities that they allow for Liberia to export into the
Just
European
tell the
Union
people what
and,
Goa means.
and to the United States without custom duty. We are not even leveraging a percent of that.
Exactly. 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 And that's precisely the point I was trying to make. So we have those trade opportunities. Are we even, and as you said, not even a percent of that is being leveraged. And if we did, first of all, countries that make progress and that develop, one of the factors is the economy. The economy, the productive sector, job creations. You talk about our coastline and the various ports that we have. So we have the port of Monrovia, we have the port of Buchanan, we have the port of Sino, we have the port of Harper. What's happening besides the port of
We had to put a Greenville.
and the port of Greenville? What's happening
Five
besides the
ports.
port? Sorry, and what was it, Ava?
No, I said yeah, five.
In
Yes,
19 in, no, in 18 before 1847, we had seven.
yeah,
We had
okay,
to put a Edina.
yeah.
We had to put we had to put Rabos Port. Mind
Thank you.
you, the big issue around the independence of Liberia and the seizure of the British ship and all that that led to the independence happening at the port of Edina.
Yeah,
So
Wow.
we have the resources.
we
They're
do.
just dormant, just
Yeah,
waiting for
yeah.
us to turn them into value.
Why do I have to, when I'm taking goods from here to send to my people in the service, why do I have to ship them to Monrovia and then drive on a place that has no road, maybe for a week, before I can take, something to the people? When we have a port in Greenville or a port in Harper that I can go to, and if we were able to develop it where people from Ivory Coast, the Taboo area and other places could also ship to as well. So it's again, we keep going back to the issue of incompetence, lack of vision, and lack of leadership, and I think that's just a significant
And you know
problem.
one of the biggest thing I think, and Councilor Verda can probably come in. There's a lot of conflict of interest when it comes to people who are holding government position wanting to be entrepreneurs and business people. So they divert all those opportunities, to themselves. And if we look at stuff like them declaring the assets and stuff like that, if you look keenly, you can probably see some of those conflicts there. It is really sad that they suppress the facilitation they're supposed to do for the rest of the people. They try to divert it to themselves, and that limits our potential as an economy big time. So hopefully,
Yeah. Well, one of the things that are the former NPA managing director and even the former minister of state and presidential affairs were accused of is exactly that they had a company that they gave a no bid contract to basically operate at the Port of Buchanan. That's
Yeah.
exactly a conflict of
Yeah.
interest right there. So
Well,
it's
I
all
put
about the interest. It's not about opening up the market for competition and for growth.
so with
And
that we're
Councilor
except
Verdia can come in. Yeah.
yeah, second Alfonso there. Sorry for that, but I just put up the indicators a little bit from Singapore also, a country that has its island. It has no natural resource except the water, and within 50 years roundabout has risen from a poor country, a country with a land space of 350 square miles, has risen from a poor country to one of the first world country, one of the richest and most efficient countries in the world. And
look at the GDP per capita.
as we go along, we will try to figure out how did they get here. But I want us to keep an open mind in this discussion, even though we're talking about issue of incompetence. But how does incompetent marriage corruption also? Because it seemed to me both phenomena get the same produce the same outcome.
Look at the
Listen,
face
this,
and poor
this
ratings.
is
Wow.
this
Okay,
is
okay, okay, Vodia, go in.
all these projections, that we're looking at are very embarrassing when we consider the fact that back in 1960 1964, our economic projection against Senegal and Rwanda were far better. We're 75% better than them because Liberia was considered uh, 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 economic growth, on the horizon, back then. But we've said it. All of the speakers have said it over and over. They keep mentioning the issue of leadership and vision. Leadership and vision, and I think those are key factors that are responsible for our economic stagnation and lack of growth. But unfortunately for me, I think that while you have Rwanda up there, I see Rwanda as a bit conflicting, because you have the economic growth is there, but in terms of democracy, I don't think Rwanda is the best example.
Yeah,
Because
we did mention that, Vodia, about
I don't think Rwanda is the best example. You have opposition leaders who are all in exile and have been killed and all of that. But the economic policy and the way Kagame has been able to drive his people is also something that we can emulate. So when we talk about democracy and economics, in many cases they're supposed to go along, but in some cases they just don't go along. I think one is that kind of solution where you have a benevolent dictator who is doing all he can, to make sure that his people are constricted and they do what he wants, but at the same time the country is benefiting. So you can look at the economic viability, the economic growth, but in terms of democracy, good governance, there is an issue there.
so
But
let's do why you got it flow. Let's do a contrast with Liberia. We got more or less we are being reported as doing well with democracy, free and fair election, free press. Yet we got a dismal economic performance.
well, then that's what we're talking about, leadership and vision. I'm not sure Liberia has been elevated to that country that is doing very well in democracy. We have two successful elections, maybe three, since the three successful elections, and that's good. That carries the rating up. But in terms of the quality of leadership that we have, it's another thing. And how open is this leadership? How competent are the people who are managing the economy? What are the different programs? How are we promoting economic vitality? How are people growing? What's our current GDP? What's the earning? How much dollar a Liberian, a typical Liberian earns on a daily basis or on a monthly basis? Those are things we need to look at as well. What's responsible for that? I think what's driving these basic issues that are leading to economic stagnation and lack of economic growth is our leadership. We have resources, but we are not utilizing the resources in the way we should be doing. They're not open. We are preventing people from investing because we're creating conditions for them not to come and invest. So investors are already struggling when it comes to Liberia. And then because it's corruption. The issue of Liberia and leadership is just selfish and people want to amass wealth for themselves. So we adapt, and the issues are not laws. We have very good laws on the board. What has happened is that politically we've not been prepared, we've not availed ourselves to abide by the laws that we have on the board. There's too much interference with economic and other processes. People interfere because of selfish reasons. So corruption is actually undermining our economic growth. And corruption at every level of our society has undermined our growth. The vision that we have, people get elected on vision, but when you get to power, they are broken. The platform that they present are thrown away. So it boils down to competence and the vision for the country. When are we going to have a government that subject itself to the will of the people and say, this is the policy, this is what we're going to do? I think that is the issue.
What is the will of the people in our democracy? The
I
will of the
people,
people, the will of the people is manifested by the vote, right?
It's not just in the board, but every government that comes to power has a responsibility and is there stated in our constitution. And so ensure that there is an environment where people can thrive. It means there will be means of work, there's security, people will be secure, they can stay home, you don't have to do things to drive people away. You must provide the incentive for people to work. Okay, and so is that vision we need to have to open industries, to bring in concessions so that it provides job opportunity for people. What we're experiencing right now in Liberia, you have concessions coming, but in no time they're closing up. Because people are demanding for concession to start, people are demanding in the back door a certain amount of money being advised to them before they can open concession. We have government officials leading government officials who are also part and parcel of their concessions and all of that. So the issue of corruption is everywhere in our national polity, everywhere, and we're talking about every level as well. So our inability to enforce laws, to adhere to the laws that we
So I've got a question.
yeah.
Go
I've got
ahead.
a question. General question is not posed to anyone in particular. Yeah. So we are talking about the thing of corruption. So are we to believe that there was no corruption in these other African countries that are flourishing? For example, we talk about Rwanda. There's Kenya. There's Uganda, and these countries that are making strides. They are not necessarily top benchmarks, but they are making strides. Would you tell me that they don't have corruption
So
in their countries?
if I may comment, Lee, there's no society, in my view, that is corruption proof, and
That
that's
is
not
correct.
yeah, and
That is correct.
yeah. There's no society in the world, no country, no government that is corruption proof. But that is not what the problem is. The problem is that the fact of the matter is that they put into place systems and structures uh, for to guide against corruption, and if corruption happens, to punish corruption.
Right.
Yeah.
Accountability.
Accountability.
Okay, let me hold you guys there for a minute,
Yeah.
right? So we're going a little or midway in the program, and in the second half we'll focus more on the house. How what kind of recommendations we have in the face of some of the things that we know or some of the things we've talked about. How do we address them in our peculiar situation, and also that is general too for other countries? But before we begin that, I wanted to run this short video by a dean of one of the schools that pushes the Lee philosophy in Singapore.
So, I was born in Singapore on 24th October 1948. So I guess I've lived in Singapore almost 70 years now. When I grew up, Singapore was still a poor developing country. Our per capita income when we became independent was $500, the same as Ghana in Africa. Either you can say the misfortune or the good fortune of being born in a very poor family in a poor Singapore. So when I was 6 years old, when I went to school for the first day, we were weighed at school. They wanted to see how heavy we were. And I was declared undernourished. So I was put in a special feeding program when I went to school, and the principal had a big pail of milk, and all the children who were underweight were asked to take one scoop of milk from the pail of milk. And our house in Singapore had no flush toilet. There was crime and riots, gangster fights in my neighborhood. So in a sense, I grew up in what you call a typical third world environment. And it's quite remarkable that in my lifetime, Singapore has gone from being a third world country to a first world country, and I have lived through this remarkable transformation. I was dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy for 13 years, from 2004 to 2017. And I would give every student who came to the Lee Kuan Yew School the same lecture. I said, I'm going to share with you the secret of Singapore's success free of charge. And I to tell the students that if you implement this secret formula, your country will succeed. And I capture the secret formula with the acronym in English, MPH. The M stands for meritocracy. Meritocracy means that you select the best people to run the country. And what brings many countries down, especially in the third world, is that when it comes to selecting the finance minister or the economics minister, they will give their jobs to their brothers, their cousins, their uncles, their relatives, and not to the best people. And Singapore did the exact opposite. In Singapore, the jobs were given to the best people. And in the case of the Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, when he went to study in Cambridge University, he was the top student in the class, if not in the university. In fact, his professors were so impressed, they said, you should become a mathematician because you'll become a world-class mathematician. Then he went to study in another great university, the Harvard Kennedy School. And in that university, he's one of the few students to get an article published in a Tier 1 economics journal. Very few students get articles published in a Tier 1 economics journal. So he's incredibly brilliant. And so if the best man of the job is Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's son, then he should be selected. Not on the basis of the fact that he's a relative, but on the basis that he's the best person for the job. So meritocracy is the first pillar of Singapore's secret formula. The second pillar is P, and P stands for pragmatism. Pragmatism is an English word, and it's an English concept. But the best definition of pragmatism was given by China's leader, Mr. Deng Xiaoping, when he said it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or a cat is white. If the cat catches mice, it is a good cat.
That's my cat.
So in the same way, it doesn't matter
Right.
what your ideology is. If it works, you use it. So Singapore was very pragmatic. So it would take some policies that are capitalist and some policies that are socialist, and it would mix them up. And that's what pragmatism is about. You're not bound by any ideology. But the third pillar, the H is of course the hardest to achieve, because H stands for honesty.
You're on mute, Cyrus.
Thank you, Ava. I will leave it at that. But we just heard the professor talk about the merit system, pragmatism, and honesty. Let's go to our own country. We've discussed all the ills, all the inadequacies. We talk about incompetence. We talk about a culture of corruption. How do we turn our country around in the face of all this?
Leaderships are seriously. We need to have a leader who believes in those three principles, those three simple principles. Merit is very critical. If you have incompetent people in position, they are insecure. They don't want people who are really competent, who are knowledgeable around them. It limits the opportunity to expand the space and have the best people working. That's the first thing. If we can have somebody who can honestly come to the table and select the best person for each position, we are in trouble, you know. And then the pragmatism. You can't be like wanting to just think, or have all these things on paper and not implement them. We have some of the best laws on the books. Do we implement them? No. I mean, we can probably get some testament from our LACC head here, former head here, from people being able to actually provide the assets, declare it fully in a timely manner that they can vet it and confirm it. It hasn't been done to allow them to operate the way they want to operate in terms of, because LACC, by the time you smell anything corrupt, you should be investigating and checking. Do they allow them to do the work? Do they allow the GSC? Even when Molu was there, we saw all those challenges. They don't allow them to do. When was the last time the legislature have been audited or the Ministry of Finance has actually been audited and public information given? Even the listers they're talking about, they did the audit. What did they do with the audit that showed that they were actually corrupt over there? Ministry of Agriculture, same thing. So we see all these repetitive things that lead to institutional corruption where the laws on the book are not implemented. So then you think the actual contract that some of these people procure through our PP and CC people. Look at the RIA road. And before that, there are many other examples of where we have not been pragmatic in implementation. We have not held people accountable. The honesty part is just like our whole country, a lot of countries. So I can't even argue with that.
That's why it's not. That is a.
But Voda, before you come in, maybe I want to. There's something we're missing, right? We got leaders. We've had leaders and things in the country. We know that from the professor example, we need a merit system. We need to be pragmatic. We need honesty. How do we do it? We got good laws on the books, yes. We have Madam Sirleaf president. Are we implying that I think she was a better leader, that these problems were solved and addressed?
No, they were not.
We have President Talbot came out with the slogan, total involvement for higher height. I declare war on ignorance, disease, and poverty. Because people are people. How do we ensure that people adhere to these principles? Because the laws are on the books. Everybody knows when people corrupt in Liberia, but nothing is still being done.
But for us to get there, where you're talking about, it requires a big movement of people, a change of people. It's not just the leaders. You need to have a country where people have invested and believe that they can get away with things that are inappropriate, with things that are illegal. You have to change their mind. So you need a leader who drives that, but you need a people to get on the chain, the wagon of change, on that wagon of change. So if you have a leader who is so dedicated to democracy, who's so dedicated to the merit system, you need a legislature to also get on that and to drive that merit system. You need a judiciary to also do that. So this is a call for people, the people of Liberia. When are we going to do that? We need to engage in programs that will enlist massive education efforts to train people, to conscientize people, to mobilize people in believing that if we work towards a merit system and we can be realistic and call a spade, and we can be honest, that's important. We can make some change, because you can be at the level of the legislature driving, is passing laws, and then you need people to implement the laws and get to the Ministry of Finance, and people forget about those laws and they do what they want to do. Even at the level of executive marshal, our problem just didn't start with George Weah government. Of course, this is one of the worst government we've had, but our problem just didn't start with George Weah government. It's been with Liberia from independence. We've had it. Remember, I felt back in 1887 we had issue of corruption. Liberia is set on its own foundation, was founded on the corrupt foundation, because there was issue of segregation. And you have, at some point, you have the mulattoes going against the dark-skinned Liberians. There were coup d'etat and all of that. So we're not saying that this government is responsible for our problems. No, our problems have been there, but there have been different attempts to address it. I think the best attempt we've had to address that was during the Talbot and Ellen administration. I would not say Ellen Johnson was the best, but one thing she did, and I said that the other day, she was able to establish structures. She was able to create structures that we are supposed to respect. If we can respect that, even though sometimes she herself failed to respect those structures, but if we can respect those structures, then we'll be good. So it's not just the president, it's the people. We need to change the people's mind. I said something the other day. We took somebody to court for corruption, for using the Liberian people money, converting it or diverting it to something else. And when we got to court, the whole group of people were there booing and jeering at the LSCC lawyers and us for bringing this person to court. So it's not just the leader, it's the people. What they've come settled with, what they think is the order of the day, or the way of life. We need to change that way of life.
Councilor Doe, I have one point. So let's just look at what you just presented. Okay. So we talk about leadership. That word has been used almost by everybody on this panel. Okay. So it will be leadership for that judge to take hold of his chamber to ensure that these people that are in his way and throwing dirt and sand in the gear of progress to be removed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
And
that is one step. That is one step. I mean, we got to get away from these excuses. We're making a whole lot of excuses. We need to start doing more so
That's
than
that's why I said the
philosophizing and so forth.
pragmatism, being
and
practical.
yeah, and if
That's
I
right.
may add to what Councilor Verdia said, um, he did talk about the laws and everything. So I'm not going to go over those things. But there's one very important point that he made that I wanted to add to, and that is the point of we the people. What are we the people doing? In Liberia, what do we do when somebody steals money and comes to us? We follow them. We celebrate them. We don't shun them. We don't say the man is. We talk about corruption as if it's a abstract thing. The
Yeah.
government is corrupt, but the person at finance ministry, the person at labor, the person at justice who's corrupt is our friend. We defend him. We celebrate. We drink beer with him. We don't criticize him. That is part of the fundamental problem that we have. And I'll go really quickly. So I was in another forum not long ago, and people were talking about, oh, the University of Liberia students are really horrible. They're harassing the government. Everybody should feel free to go on the campus of the University of Liberia. I think that is something really important that the University of Liberia students are doing that we all need to learn from.
You
We
going?
need to shun these people and these individuals who are actually,
Uh,
Mark need to go on mute.
why
yeah.
you going?
Yeah, sorry. So we need as citizens, in addition to the laws, in addition to criticizing the judges, in addition to
We
criticizing the
on one
police and the
on one
president.
podcast and shit. Now they can't even get it falling.
Alfonso, just give me a
I didn't
second.
know
Let me
what
get
was going on.
let me get Mark Amla on so he know that he's on the air. Mark, we can hear you even though we can't see you.
All right, let me.
Can you hear me? Mark.
I think he just muted himself.
Yeah.
Text the
Okay.
man in the background.
Yeah, Mark, if you can hear me, I'll let you know you're a security man. Start talking all your secrets in the public.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, Mark, can you hear me? Hello?
I thought you were supposed
Hello?
to manage people in the back
Yeah.
in the backstage before you get there.
Yeah. Okay, Alfonso, go ahead. I would do
Yeah.
the house cleaning with Mark.
So we as a people have a responsibility, and we need to encourage the small groups of people who are doing that to do the same. It's not just the institutions of state. And I'll go really quickly to meritocracy and talk very briefly about how we could do it. We have a civil service agency. When you want a government job in this country or in any state here or in many places, you go through a process. You take the civil service test for that particular job that you want. And that's how people get hired into the civil service. That's a system of meritocracy for which we have available structures in the country. Is that being followed? It's not to a large extent, but what can we do again as civil society institutions, as opposition political parties? Mr. Lee, you mentioned that earlier. Opposition political parties have a vested interest in the direction of the country and therefore have a responsibility to make sure that these institutions. Growing up as a young man, I used to hear on the radio all the times an opposition political party has taken the government to court. A
Mm-hmm.
civil society
Mm-hmm.
organization has taken the
Mm-hmm.
government to court to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they perform their
That's
role,
correct.
or you might not always succeed and win the case in court, but you accomplish two things. You expose the corrupt judge. You expose the corrupt practice within whatever institution you were taking to court. So when they took people to court and said, I don't know the writs. I don't remember them now. But the issue of writ of certiorari, the issue of writ of mandamus, the issue these things to compel government to perform its duty.
Certiorari.
Yes, these are some of the things that are also lacking in our society today. So again, we've all have talked about what the institutions of state can do. I think it's also important to focus on what we as individuals, but more so as civil society organizations,
That is
can do
correct.
as well to address
Yes.
these issues.
Yes.
Yep. Um, all right. And if I may continue, because Sarah seems to have
Yeah, so now you can continue.
uh, we were talking about Singapore. We're talking about Rwanda. How did they get to where they got to? And the question was, how do we get there? So let's look at how they got there. How they got there, Singapore, for example, was sound financial and economic policy. The father, when he became Kuan Yu, when he became the prime minister of Singapore, he put into place several key things. There is a country in Africa, it's a Burundi, I don't quite remember, where at the airport, as you approach the airport in an airplane, the first thing you see is if you're coming here to bribe people and engage in corruption, you are not welcome. Don't come here. Um, Again, and they actualize it. They actualize it. They don't take the bribes and all of those things, and they ensure that whoever is coming to invest, and there's a competitive environment whereby people really actually compete for investment instead of giving no bid contracts to governments and those kinds of things. That's a how. Now, how do we get there? The other factor is, how do we vote? How do our candidates even get selected? How do they even become candidates for leadership? That's another deficit we need to address. So somebody gets up, has some money, forms a political party, and is the candidate. Other than going through a democratic process, I haven't seen a single political party in Liberia that goes through a democratic process where people go and compete within the political institution to select their standard bearer. Everybody who has a little bit of money to form a political party becomes the standard bearer. What that does is that it undermines the democratic process. People therefore just follow you for the money, because I was interviewing a candidate for president the other day, and he said, "Oh, we need education, healthcare, this, that, blah, blah, blah." I said, "How is that new?" Everybody is saying the same thing. What, you're not bringing anything new to the table by articulating these things. But if we're able to open the space and bring a lot of other people and different ideas on board, we might be able, as a people, to change the voting pattern of our people, and by that elect the right. We're talking about good leaders, right? But they have to be elected. There's sometimes, a lot of times, our leaders are elected. What do? We elect the wrong people because they bring money, because they are the people who can form the political parties, have the money to do so. They are the people who can buy bags of rice and stuff for us and pay our children tuition. They are the people who have the loudest mouth. And until we stop that, that is a factor that will continue to contribute to our backwardness. And we might never get to the leadership that we need to be able to turn our society around.
Let me throw in a question here. I think Vodia, you probably be best to answer this. This is a practical matter, right? So we have an amendment done to the code of conduct that reduces the number of years for which a public official should resign his post if he's attempting to contest an election from 2 years to 1 year. So that law was ratified. It's on the books. Quite recently, the president comes out and asks people in his government that those who want to contest, they can resign now, even though we have passed 1 year already. In my mind, it's a clear violation of the law, but that can be done. How do we now, outside government, who are in civil society, make this not to happen? Is there something that citizens can seek an injunction from the court or from the elections commission? What can be done to ensure that the laws are adhered to?
Indeed, we can. Indeed, citizen can file a writ of injunction that enjoins the election commissioner from recognizing and accepting those people who fall in that category to register. We had the same situation in 2017 when Manassetti was leaving office also. Now this is the president who actually advocated for the code of conduct. In the code of conduct, it might have been a bad law, but that was the law that required public officials who had interest in protesting to resign 2 years or 18 months before election. That was the law. What the mother said you do. She came back and said, "No, let's just let everybody contest so that we don't have all this issue of trying to start." Because there were people saying that law was passed because there were 7 presidents who were being singled out. You know, we went to Miss Jones, who was then governor of the central bank. We thought that law was passed just because they wanted to prevent Miss Jones. But several other government officials were also interested in it. But they did not resign any after the noise people made before the deadline came about. There were several announcements that were called for different civil society groups that public officials who want to take part in election are supposed to be resigning by this time. So they knew, but they chose not to. That fanatic who is now in the Senate, how did he get elected? He got elected after the president said himself, you know, you just forget about that law and let everybody pass. That was the abuse of our system. Yes. And that was coming from the president. You know? So
it comes from the president again. You say he asking people, he not asking, he passing an executive order after a law, the code of conduct is clearly established that those people should leave, resign a year ahead of time.
So can the executive order further supersede the law?
No.
That is something for the court to determine.
No.
Okay.
You know,
and that takes us back.
The order is supposed to address something that is not covered by law.
Yeah,
that's what the executive
That's
order
correct.
is supposed to do.
Or an emergency
that is not covered by law. But if there's a law there, the executive order cannot
He has to
law.
abide. Yes.
And I think Cyrus and gentlemen, that then takes us back to Cyrus's question, which is what can civil society do, or is there anything that civil society can do? And I think
no, civil society, we can protest, we can go to court, you know, individual citizens can do all of those things. But when you have institutional corruption, that the president will influence decisions in the court, the president influence police decisions. The president,
but we can't, as a society, we cannot come to those challenges without conclusion. We need to put the court to a test. So let the record show.
Yeah. I just said we'll take it to the court. I didn't say we shouldn't go.
So political parties, Cyrus and Ava, everybody, have specific vested interest in this. Because the people who will be contesting in constituencies and for positions that political parties have vested interest in. They have candidates for. Mm-hmm. So Councilor Verdier can correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes when you go to court, there's this doctrine of, are you directly impacted? Political parties and candidates in this case will be directly impacted and therefore will have standing to take these things to court. However, if we say the system is corrupt, man, that judge is not going to listen to us or nothing's going to happen, let's just let it happen. What do? We institutionalize abuse of our laws, abuse of the system.
Apathy.
Yes. And what happens? Apathy. It continues to happen.
So we have a good opportunity these elections to be able to create a critical mass to hold to ask the relevant institutions to prevent these people from running who are in violation of the law. I think it's a fair shake.
And
what do you mean? You mean the number of political parties to do it?
Even civil society organizations, individual citizens, because the election result impacts everybody.
Anybody.
I agree with you. I agree that it should be that way. But a lot of times, people don't take that because they are so intimidated sometimes by the reaction, the hunting that this government comes with, where they want to punish anybody who tries to go against them, whether it's your family, your cousin, your friend, wherever, so that pushback from government to react to and take action against these people is what sometimes limits some people, say, oh, I worry about my job, I worry about my life, I worry about my family life and all of that stuff. So we really, really need as a people to be able to.
If I believe in the rule of law, I am in party ABC. If you have a candidate who is not eligible because he did not resign 1 year before the election process, and he came to my party and want to contest, why should we in our party allow him to? We should disqualify him.
No, we should disqualify internally, yes.
Yeah, right there. But not relying on the court, not relying on anybody, just relying on the laws for our party.
Right.
No, but we have an election commission, don't we?
The election commission can't enforce that.
They should.
What do you mean by election commission can? What
They
do you
should,
mean?
Hold on
brother.
1 second. Wait, let me answer Sonny. The code of conduct is there. They're supposed to comply with the code of conduct.
Yeah, it's a law. They're supposed to qualify you based
Yeah,
on the
I
existing
agree.
laws.
I
Exactly.
agree. Then the
Exactly.
president comes. The president who appoints that election commissioner comes. If that's an independent election commissioner, I agree they can enforce the law. But if the president comes and brings an executive order, you think that person will go against that executive order? Let's be honest here.
But
No.
AVA, the CPP just took the election commission of the Supreme Court. So in that token,
I mentioned that before.
I know that, and you did mention. So in that token, the CPP, for example, can do something along these
But there will
lines
be
as
many
well.
lawsuits, but nobody has declared yet. People just talking. You can go take Maggie to court to this.
Oh, I know
to the
somebody
next
who
president.
has declared. I know Duana Sion, who just resigned and
Yeah, they just
declared in
resigned for
Mount for Senate.
That's the resignation. Until that
And-
person submit to the neck, you cannot file. What are you filing lawsuit on?
Well, he's okay. So are you saying that? I assume. I mean, Brother Lee said that you were part of her political party.
I am a part of the ANC.
Okay. Are you saying here that if any of those people declared, then the ANC will be prepared to take action?
I cannot make a statement because I'm not an official, but as a partisan and somebody who believes in the rule of law, definitely I will be pushing for them to file action against any of those officials who will submit an application to register as a candidate to the National Election Commission.
And if any of them come to your political party, you will also advocate that they don't become.
Well, a question
candidates
that that's
during-
supposed to even be considered. That shouldn't even be a question. We gotta go by the rules, or except we will have a lawless society.
One early route civil society can take right now is to ask the court for declarative judgment. You ask the court for
Thank you.
declarative judgment, you say, what the court asks you, what do you want to do, and say, this is the law, you send the law to the court and say, what is the court position on this? That can prevent everybody from testing.
Correct.
The court of conduct take it to court right now. This
And they-
society can do that.
and they can-
Ask the court
and-
to do a declarative judgment on the law, what is the basis of this law? You know, they can stop that. And also, if you're gonna wait for each person to declare before you take them to court, that's a whole lot of. You do a declarative judgment, it covers everybody who has not resigned in 1 year, cannot be eligible to.
That's serious answer the man giving. So
Yeah.
it's now up to
Exactly.
And
up to the political parties and other people to.
political parties, if let goes ahead and register somebody who follow that, you take that to court. You know, you take that to court. On my damos, you can do that. Look, quite recently, just less than 3 weeks ago, I sat here and thought about our processes, what was happening in Liberia. What I would have done if I was in Liberia as a lawyer. So I called two of my colleagues in Liberia and told them, I said, look, with what is going on, there have been too many cases of death, murder that are unsolved, and we don't have any conclusive report. You know, this is serious. It leads to insecurity. It's driving people from our country. Can you guys, I'll join you, I can do the filing, I can write everything. Can you guys file a mandamus against the Ministry of Justice? So that the Ministry of Justice produces a conclusive report on what happened to Gete, the auditor's case, what happened to the Ambassador Thomas' death. And they just need to cover those things. And police who are not going to name said the council you right, and that's a very good thing. But here's my concern. My concern is the court is so compromised, it's not going to listen to that thing. That was his concern. And this is a very smart lawyer as well. So I said to him, look, forget the court being compromised. I almost said maybe the result may not be what we want, but let's challenge the court.
Put
court is set free.
Put on the record.
Challenge the court. Unfortunately, I can do it from where I am because I'm not in Liberia. But up to today, the police have not responded. You know what? The next time the call me, they're talking about security and insecurity in other countries. They're scared.
Yeah, I just said that. That's what happens. People are intimidated, on the repercussions of them going against this government interest. It's honestly true.
And those
So-
are legitimate
yeah.
concerns. But
So, yeah, go ahead, Fanso.
I'm saying those are security, of course, self-preservation as a first law of nature. So I do understand that. Those are legitimate concerns. But that is precisely the reason why governments
we are here.
do those things.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we are where we are
And that's
today.
the reason why we're here. they know that if they frighten you, it scare you, you will not challenge them. So they frighten and scare you. So what is the alternative? Do we say, oh, and just say, well, they will run after me and my family, and I will be fired from jobs, so I will join them and give them the 1 million that they want, or the 25 million, so they can give it to money changers in the street, quote unquote. That is the system. That's
Yeah.
exactly what dictators and power governments try to do: suppress the people and scare them into submission.
One of the things that I thought probably we could talk about a little bit is about even the election process, which is part of our democracy. I don't see a practice in Liberia yet where people contesting for office, including the office of the president, office of representative, are held to any kind of explanation, reasons why they must be elected. There seem always to be a presumption that, oh, okay, that this man time now, or man, they men are our man, or something like that. Even today, I don't even see any mechanism where people who have expired are even called to question and say, look, guess what? LEC here, they're supplying electricity to less than 5% of the population. We've been having these recurring problems over and over. The way you're trying to be president, how will you approach this LEC issue? How will you approach water and sewer and the solid waste that is coming on the street every day, seemingly unattended? Have a Ministry of Finance and the LRA work on budgets every year. At the end of the year, the budget period, they come out and say, oh, we got a shortfall. You got a situation where a Minister of Finance would go and give an explanation that he took $30 million from a company that does not have a concession with the government of Liberia on an arrangement that they will give them the use of a railroad. And he said, oh, I had to take that money from the people because we needed to meet up with payroll. How are these people who are aspiring to be president in the face of all these vices and inadequacies? How are we asking them, how would you do it differently? I don't hear those kinds of discussions being held. It's almost a foregone conclusion that Mr. A is supposed to Mr. B. So even to the extent that we're having a conversation today where there is a critical mass to get one Mr. A and one Mr. B to kind of get to make one candidate. Apparently, the perception is that they are going to win. But are we even asking how they will govern?
But that's not a responsibility of NEC. NEC is a
No. I mean, I'm saying that.
Yeah, if NEC does that, then NEC will be intervening in the opportunity of citizens selecting their leaders.
No, Vodio, but I don't mean NEC. I mean public discourse.
Okay, so that's what public society and civil society should do. Organizations where all candidates will commit to participate in a debate, they do that. So you have an opportunity to scrutinize these people. What NEC is supposed to do, and actually doing that, is that everybody who is going to contest for public office is supposed to declare their assets also to NEC. Who talks about that? Nobody talks about. I don't know whether NEC makes it a criteria.
But it is a law.
It is the law. You're supposed to declare your assets. It's supposed to be processed. So people see what is it that you have when you go for the election. And then over and over, as we like to do that, I don't know what this is for that's what we have to do. But the issue of public debate is very, very important. But that is a responsibility that falls on the side of civil society organization. People should get together, create a commission for whatever national debate or whatever, and allow all candidates to submit to the conditions that when they are eligible to contest public office, they will agree to come to have 3 or 4 debates where citizens, electors will have the right to scrutinize them on their policies, on their earnings, and their projection, on their vision, all of that. That's what we should do, instead of I was thinking that NEC could do that. Well, of course, NEC is happy if you don't allow them to do that. But I'm saying the simple thing that NEC is supposed to do is not even for go far with that. And another thing, look, the way to change our society also, we always say election definitely is that way. But there's several things that happen before election. We have a question of voter registration. How people getting registered? We have a question that. What's supposed to happen in the football register? Is there a census? We have to question that. It has to be credible. All of those things lead to faulty elections. We need to do that. And then people go into the polls and look, they're like right now, like when people are crying, they say they're suffering, they say that. How can we be crying and then we know that we have a chip? We have something to ensure that we change a government to a government of our liking. But are we going to use that? So it's a whole lot of things. Look, the guys in Singapore, I would like to get away from Singapore and Uganda. I come back to Ghana. Back to Sierra Leone, who just quite recently was in the same situation with us. What growth, what progress is Sierra Leone making that we also can we had a seen in Sierra Leone had a whole population of hard people who were amputated, all that kind of thing. Do you know what they did to their own people? They persecuted them. Those who feared law were not brave enough to show themselves public government. When they saw them publicly, they marched to the rest of their journey over, or they were executed. So you don't have people who were former warlords, people who maim and kill people, because on that kind of walk, walking the street of Sierra Leone, like they're doing in Liberia, they're in the Senate, they're in the Legislature, they're House of Representatives, all of that. You have criminals, and the Liberian people are living with them. We have to take this change on our own. We, as a people, have to drive our change. We can't sit there and wait and say, we'll let America do something and bring in war. We can use our own core system and prosecute these people. So leadership again. Leadership. We need a political leadership to drive all this change. Because if we have political stability, we will also have economic stability. So there's a huge responsibility on the part of Liberian people. All of them, we need to educate them. It's a tough thing, but that's what we gotta do.
And if I may add to that, going back to Cyrus's question, which is why aren't we asking these people what new or different that they're bringing to the table, and how do we hold them accountable to that? Again, I'll keep going back to civil society because that's my background. The other day, as I was watching television, I saw that a women's organization, had invited candidates for position for Senate in New Jersey to come so that they can question them in terms of what their plans and programs are for addressing women-related issues. I'm using this story to say that civil society organizations in Liberia, besides even setting up a national commission that would do debates, different civil society organizations, different groups, workers' unions, trade unions have a vested interest in the economy. They also they want to be able to organize unions so they can, engage in collective bargaining to be able to make sure that they make the money that they deserve and get the protection on the job. Currently, Liberian labor law does not allow public sector workers to organize. So these civil society organizations with vested interests also have a role to play. If you come and you tell us and you lay out your platform in terms of what you would do, we also look at your track record, and based upon that, we can endorse you. We can say we will support you. We can run ads for you. We can campaign for you. So these are the kind of structures that civil society can put into place in Liberia as well, in addition to any national debate structure that really quizzes and questions these people about what leadership difference that they would bring to the table. Right now, what it is about anybody getting up and just saying, "Oh, I'll pay roads. I will improve the education system. I will improve the healthcare system."
Yeah.
But everybody else is saying the same thing. How are you going to do it? What is your track record of doing it in the past?
How is the difference?
Yes. So these again, we can hold these people accountable, and we can issue statements and say, "Well, we talked to X, 2, 3, 4, candidates, and this is what they said, and based upon what they said, we think this is the president." That's how labor unions endorse candidates in this country. And once they do that, and the candidate gets into office, what is Joe Biden doing right now for the labor movement? It's because they quizzed him, they saw his policies, and they said, and the campaign for him. He won the elections, and he's giving them what they want to do.
Yeah, well, they had organic interests. Okay.
Yes.
One thing I want to ask though, what is the responsibility of the election commission in terms of creating videos or different vehicles to educate the people? Because when I say educate the people, I don't mean to give them literature to read, but to just engage the people to understand what their power is. What kind of power they have in these forthcoming elections and others.
So as Councilor Verdia said, the Election Commission can play the role, but it's not the responsibility of the Election Commission.
No, that is voter education.
Exactly. I'm coming there. The Election Commission is not charged with doing civic education. The Election Commission is charged with doing voter education, not civic education.
Civic, no,
The
it's
Election
civic.
Commission
No,
is charged with educating people
Alfonso,
to
stop
vote.
misinforming the people. You look on all the Elections Commission documentation, they will say CVE,
Yes.
civic and voter education.
But not
That is their responsibility. Don't
but
take it
around
away.
elections, though. Around elections, not around building
Elections
civic
also-
democratic
elections
societies
also
as we are
focuses
talking
on
about.
rights. Elections focuses on rights. Civic is civic. Civic responsibility is clear. So
No.
we get, but the
Go ahead,
point
finish.
the point is our country as a whole has put civic to the side. Most of our people don't know what responsible citizenship is. Some of us fought to get it in the schools. Today we have civics in the schools. Okay, we have civic in the school, but it's not as nationally spread as it should be. Again, because of funding,
Understand
because
that.
of institutional corruption.
Civics is
No, one
divided.
second, let me
Civics
finish
is
now.
divided.
Okay, guys. Okay.
Some
Okay.
some
How
people
about-
want to be the one printing the book when they create the book. So everything involving our government, unfortunately, is corruption, corruption, corruption. Intellectual property does not matter. Actually doing the work does not matter. Or select few want to just benefit from some of these things. So the responsibility of civics is also the Ministry of Education, teaching our people, having it in schools at all levels for people to start to understand and build nationalism and patriotism towards the country. It's not evident. It should be in government. It should be how the national government handles situation in a patriotic, in a responsible, in a nationalistic way, and that is not being exemplified. It should be-
Okay,
Cyrus, I
Alva. Okay,
just
Alva.
wanted
Let me say
Very
something.
quickly,
Let me say something
Yeah,
quick. Right,
civic,
we have reached the edge of our broadcast, so it doesn't seem to me that we have yet answered the question on the how. Concisely. I mean, we are throwing ideas here and there.
Yeah,
So,
we approached it.
let me give each of you guys some time to compact your views in a parting comment on this issue about how at least understanding why societies failed, what our outlook is. I mean, what our condition is in our country as we are spelled out in different perspective, and then what do you think we can do differently that we probably have talked about or we haven't talked about? So let me start off with Lee.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. I really believe that the last point I made regarding education, voters' education, is so important. We don't want to elect people because maybe they were affiliated with what we recognize as the national pastime, or because of different trivial issues. Okay, these issues that do not help the country move forward. Okay, I believe that fundamentally we need to establish some kind of database, okay, where all the people in the diaspora, in the United States, in Europe, in different parts of the world that are Liberians can register, okay, and have a professional registry. And these people can be contacted by the government at different times and stagger or work their vacation and things of that sort to contribute something to the country. And again, that is voluntary. You set it up to encourage that facilitation to help your country. I have a lot of ideas.
Transfer.
That's one that I think is very essential, and I'll stop there.
Okay, we'll pick up next.
I can go real quickly. Again, the foundation of every society is education. So definitely, and education can be accomplished and should be accomplished actually using several approaches. One, the national government has a responsibility to make sure that people are educated, whether it's civics or whether it's training, to make sure that we create the necessary and required workforce in the country. Because even if you have meritocracy, but don't have the people to do the job, you can create an elitist system. You can create just a few of people, a few group of people, small group of people can be the ones doing the job who have four, five, six jobs, or they and their children, the people who have the resources, they and their children will be the ones taking the jobs. So you also need to create a system that expands education training to everybody, so that you know everybody has an opportunity to rise up in society. So education is very critical. The other part of education is civics. We need our education system. I believe Ava and Lee and everybody else alluded to that. Civics is very critical to help citizens learn about their role as citizens, which I believe is lacking somewhat in Liberia. Their power as citizens, and what they can do to really change their society. Second thing I want to talk about is civil society institutions. Civil society institutions have an extremely critical role to play. Unfortunately, our civil society institutions in Liberia are weak. Some of them don't even know what they're supposed to do, and they get easily bought over. In the absence of strong civil society institutions that project a collective view and interest, what happens is people fall back to tribes, to ethnicity. This person come from my tribe. This person come from my county. So I will vote for them. As opposed to this person has a program that will help me as a worker to unionize at my job so that I'm able to engage in collective bargaining for more wages, benefits, healthcare benefits, etc., and protection of the job. If we do that, the woman in from Grand says and a woman from Nimba will see that they have the same interest in common, and therefore they will come together across tribal lines and support the candidates who will address or who have committed to addressing those interests. So we need to build strong civil society institutions. Civics and elections. I just wanted to make a clarification on that. Civics is divided into several factors. Civics is the broad terminology. Education of the citizenry in terms of their right to form labor unions, women's groups, students groups is not the responsibility of the Elections Commission, but that is civics. However, civics in terms of people understanding the role of their representatives and who to vote for and where to vote and how they should vote and their right to vote, it's the responsibility of the Election Commission, but also of civil society organizations. So there needs to be a distinction made there. And the reason I'm doing this is I don't want us to think that Election Commission is responsible for just educating everybody and telling us how to form organizations and how to come together to pursue our various interests. That's not their job. Their job is around elections and representation. Finally, accountability. We as citizens, outside of what the government is willing to do, need to hold people accountable. I've said this and I'll say it again. What the University of Liberian students did the last time when they actually what now if they assaulted him, they were wrong. But wherever you see somebody who was just accused or convicted of stealing money and you jeer at them and you boo them, whether it's in a club, whether it's on the LU campus, it's legitimate public discourse, it's legitimate civic engagement, and we should encourage more of that. Don't let somebody who is corruption is not abstract. It's human beings in the government who are carrying on corruption. We can't be interfacing with those people on the lower level, but at the same time criticizing government for corruption. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you. Who will roll next? Ava?
Yeah. So I don't know why Alfonso is trying to relieve NEC of their responsibility with regard to civic education, but that could be another discussion. They are a crucial part of educating the populace, especially as it relates to the civic responsibility when it comes to elections and participation, assessing candidates. All of those things are civic responsibilities that we're next supposed to help with. But unfortunately, I don't think they fund it, properly. And at the same time, I don't know that they have that committed interest to really doing it. The point of education is very critical. Just general education, just critical thinking, understanding all the issues at hand. One time, the USAID had a program, the Liberia Accountability and Voice Initiative, LAVI. I don't know what happened with that particular program, but it would have been great for our people if they have benefited from that program to really understand what their rights are, what their responsibilities are. So at the bottom of it, this whole thing we've been talking about, mindset change, people understand the issues and stuff, is critical. But we have not been able to do that as a people. And it starts with leadership. We keep saying it. We need a leader who will really focus on these things and ensure that it demands the implementation and execution of these things. Because it's just not him. It's about him making sure the people who are responsible for these tasks are held accountable to make sure they got specific milestones and deliverables along these lines. That is, whether it's 50,000 people going to a classroom and being educated, whether it's actually having these sessions. We even have a community version of this whole civics program that we have that in the classrooms today that can be executed, but no funding. So other people will not learn from the civics book. You will learn from repetition, from action, from video, and other stuff that relates to their level of education and comprehension. So we have to deliver these things to our people in different artifacts that they can relate to. And it's not happening enough. People don't know the rights, people don't understand them. And it takes a leader who wants that to happen to do it. Many people in our government today or in elected position today prefer the people to subscribe to the bag of rice or the $20 philosophy to get them elected. They don't care for them to know whether they got the qualifications, they got the competence, they got the vision, they have done any prior thing to lead the people to vote for them accordingly. So again, Sarah, I know you keep asking what is the answer. The answer is if we can elect that correct leader who will make those kind of things happen.
Okay, Abba, thanks a lot. Thanks for that strong view. But let me ask you a quick question. Have you been to the Monrovia Museum?
The Monrovia Museum?
Right.
The one I was there when I was a small child, or
I think it's the same museum. I mean, the old executive mansion building. That's right. I think it's Buchanan and Broad Street.
Yeah, you're not talking about the Centennial Pavilion. You're talking about the old executive mansion.
Yeah, correct. Across the road from
the museum. That's a museum right there. Right.
No, I've not been there. Not since I was a kid when I used to go to the what do you call it? The library that was across the street.
Well, that's the first place. That's the first place to up your speed on civic education, because I mean the historical artifacts is there.
I was there in 2018.
You know, one full of Prince Johnson boots used to be there. I don't know whether they took it out. I don't know the relevance.
Well, I don't know if Prince Johnson boots were applied anywhere in civic education, bro. So I'm sorry. No, but I'm saying, Cyrus.
There are a lot of educational material there. I'm just making a joke. But Prince Johnson, one foot of Prince Johnson boots were there. I don't know whose idea was it to get it there, but I guess somebody threw it.
But having Prince Johnson boot there is not a bad thing.
That's fine.
It reminds us of the tragedy of our war, and not to have it repeated. So it's not a bad thing to have war artifacts present there. Maybe we should have photos also of people who were killed by Prince Johnson there as well.
But
to educate the
It
population.
should also remind us that we've not prosecuted him yet.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, but we shouldn't be glorifying his boots.
No, not glorification.
No, not glorification, just history. But Cyrus, the book, and thanks to Tenant Johnson Kima, who is the founder, visionary, and president for Child Steps International, that wrote that book that's in the schools today, Law Plus You, is very, 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 very important, to thank those people or to recognize them for that kind of vision. And for being able to bring civics back into the school. But we need to bring civics into the communities. So I don't know how they can do it, whether NEC can partner with is now Civics and Service International. They changed the name from Child Steps International to Civics and Service. If they can partner with Civics and Service, and we've piloted the community version of the stuff. It works, and people get informed, people get educated. They need to do more of that. But unfortunately, again, funding may not be there, or the incentive to do it, to educate our people, is not there for most of the political people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baudia.
You know, the executive law gives the Ministry of Education a responsibility to actually implement and conduct civic education. So that's a responsibility the Ministry of Education has to make sure that civics are taught in school. I don't know how we got out of our school system, you know. But again, I just like to also just to say that we can't expect the election commission to do entire civic education. Election commission civic education cannot be around election matters. We say that's what they do. But in terms of where we go from there, how do we get ourselves as a country out of this dungeon, out of this issue of this governance and poor governance, this rule? I would just summarize it as having responsible leadership, responsible citizenship. Responsible leadership, responsible citizenship. And responsible leadership goes from the executive mansion all the way down to the courts, goes down to the different ministries, as well as civil society. You know, take for example, in the church, more than 65% of people who enter public office are members of church and mosque. And the church is supposed to be that moral leader, you know, that's supposed to provide moral and spiritual leadership. If the church can also help to educate people, to guide leaders, you're going to go far away. Instead, the church is condoning some of the things that happen. So, for our country to grow, we need to have responsible leadership. And that leadership, responsibility on the part of people who are entrusted with some responsibility, whether it's deputy minister or assistant minister. If you have a task, you've been entrusted to a role, you need to be responsible. Responsible means you must be honest, you must be accountable to the people, and you must put Liberia first. What I do in this office would be to make Liberia a better country, and not me. That's the kind of responsible leadership I'm talking about. In terms of responsible citizenship, yeah, we should be as citizens, we should start looking for bribes. We should start calling people out. We should ensure that people are accountable. When we go to church, we can also demonstrate honesty, you know, and stop just getting behind the bandwagon. I want this to happen. We should be able to elect people who we trust or we believe can deliver, instead of people who we know and people who will give us some money. You know, those two things for me, responsible leadership and responsible citizenship, can gravitate to a extent where Liberia becomes far better if we can exemplify those elements, those virtues, in the way we vote, in the way we interact with people, the way we address the issue of law. When we get somebody get pulled over by a police officer, the first thing they want to get a police officer money. A police officer should be able to say, no, I'm not accepting money. A citizen should not be bribing that police officer. If a police officer takes a phone or the citizen takes a phone and call a minister and say, I've been arrested by this person, that minister should say, you abide and trust and respect the order that police officer is giving you. You know, that's responsible citizenship. That's what should happen. Responsible leadership. Until we get to that point, it's going to be difficult for us. You know, so we exhibit that responsibility when we go to elect our officers. We exhibit that responsibility when we are placed in public office, and we are asked to do things that are illegal. I had an experience where more than 2 occasions I had to say no to my boss. Say this is against the law. I can't do it. I never got dismissed for that because I knew what I was taking. And we need a whole lot of people. And I will tell you guys this thing, I'm proud to say here, that at one point when Manasali left office, in her party statement to me and a couple other persons, she just said, I wish we had many other public servants who were exhibiting courage, that some of you have exhibited. Because there were some of us who said, this is against the law. I can't do this, I can't do that, because this will violate this law. If you believe in that and you can defend it, you know, it's a good thing. And a lot of Liberians should be doing that. We should not be, you know, the finance minister is not supposed to go and do background services. It's not his job. You know, you got to be able to say no to certain things. So if Liberians can demonstrate responsible leadership and responsible citizenship, we should be a better country, you know, going forward.
And very quickly, I just want to pick up on something you said, Councilor Vardio, which is very profound. The role of churches and our mosques and all of that. I remember there was a time in the Catholic Church when Archbishop Michael Francis used to expel corrupt government officials from the church, began by denying them communion and participation in religious rites, other religious rites.
Yeah, you can. The fact about citizens' own responsibility in the whole civics process, and those institutions like churches, like mosques, the major civil service organizations, institutions that are out there, it can be understated. It's just very critical, and then it starts from that core unit, the family.
Services. I think, yeah, no, thank you. But that's the point I wanted to make. It has to be a collective effort by everybody, the mosques, the imams, the bishops, the priests. If the president or the minister comes to you and he's supposed to give money and therefore you honor him, even though he just stole millions of dollars from the people, the church making father of the year, mother of the year, etc. That is just a semblance of the decay we have that needs to be uprooted.
And this is commonplace in our country, so we have a long way to go. You guys could not have said it better. I think we cover our basics here. We still got a lot more work to do, a lot more talk. I want all of us to take on the opportunity when it arises to participate in stopping those who have fallen outside of the threshold to run for government if they intend to do it. In what weak way that we can, we need to advocate that they don't be allowed to break the law as we go into this new election. So on that, I'd like to convey again my thanks to you guys for making this a rich discussion, for taking up your time this Sunday to join us. I also like to thank the audience wherever you are on this Sunday evening. I hope the discussions were rewarding and fruitful. Take it with us. We have a country that needs all of us help. We need to be constructive. We need to face up to the issues. We need to call wrongs when we see it. We can be cordial about it, but we need to be determined to move our country, if not for our own sake, but for our posterity. So thank you guys very much. I look forward to talking on many, many more issues again as we get together. Thanks a lot and have a great Sunday.
Okay, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
everybody.
goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, first we
Nice seeing you guys.
What's that?
I'll say thank you, Sarah, for bringing me and you together.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Bye.
Okay,
All right,
bye bye,
bro.
guys.